Welcome to a segment I'm gonna call Reviewing Every Super Sentai Series head written by Hiroshi Soda, because this was gonna be a much smaller video originally, but I kept adding shows until we reached this point. Here's the thing about these next few shows and why I decided to lump them together into one big video. In some way or another, they all fall under the episodic shadow of what Denji Man established, repeating a lot of the same elements of what that show did to varying degrees of success. We also run into one of my big personal problems with earlier Super Sentai series, the characterization of the main heroes. I don't fully expect complete character arcs and growth from every character in this era, but I do want them to be endearing, entertaining, and interesting, which a lot of these Sentai casts fail to achieve at times. I think Showa Kamen Rider and Ultraman can get away with a stoic, somewhat generic hero character in their shows because they're the only hero in their shows, with the episode-to-episode concepts and interactions giving more depth to the hero, the supporting characters, and the conflict. Meanwhile, Super Sentai has to juggle 5 heroes at once, 4 out of 5 of them often being samey, while the last one is a token girl at the worst of times. I do understand it though, with the stress of weekly episode production for multiple years by the same few writers and production staff, there wasn't much of a chance for change in the rock-solid established Sentai formula. It's a shame that the team aspect that made Sentai stand out from the rest initially became a shackle to the show's overall quality for me. Speaking of not for me, we're starting this era with Goggle 5, which is frankly boring for me to watch and talk about. It's competently made with creative action with the gymnastic weapons our heroes use and the occasional fun episode concept. I really dug episode 6 starring the supposed evil wrestler who wants to redeem himself as a mall Santa Claus. But other than that, this is the most apathetic I feel about a Sentai series. There's a kernel of a neat idea here, with the hero's power coming from the ancient civilizations but being helped by the so-called computer boys and girls of the future, but outside of a few neat monologues early on, I didn't feel that idea was explored all that well. It's the bare minimum of what a Sentai show could be for me. It's fine for weekly viewing, but as a whole picture, it bores me. Dynaman is about on the same level as Goggle 5 to me, though a little better thanks to some explosive-filled action choreography and a few stronger one-off episodes. The series was initially conceived as a baseball-themed Sentai show before switching to science, though you can tell the weird disconnect between the ideas in the show itself, since the baseball suits were practically done by the time they decided to switch gears in theming, leading to them reusing a lot of parts from those suits. Besides that, similar issues here with Goggle 5, none of the Rangers stood out to me as individuals or a team, and the science motifs are very underbaked for my liking. The villains are easily the strongest part, specifically Prince Megiddo, who later takes up the identity of the Dark Knight. Megiddo starts off as a fun, scheming general, a part of the enemy empire, before he grows into a rogue lone wolf who even helps the Dynaman to get closer to his goals. Definitely one of the more interesting storylines in a pretty basic Showa Sentai series. Now, Bioman is where we start cooking with gas, as there's already a big improvement in the pure energy of the show. I just find it more fun and exciting to watch Bioman episode to episode compared to the last two, which is helped by a more charismatic cast of characters. The thing about Bioman's cast is that on paper, they're not really that much more complex than the Google 5 or Dynaman cast, but Bioman gives them more opportunities to be endearing to the viewer through all the goofy and sometimes dramatic one-off plots and the overall team dynamic just being stronger. My favorite of the team was both Bio Yellows. The first Bio Yellow, Mika Koizumi, was one of the stronger personalities that stood out to me when watching the show. She starts off as a standoffish individual busy with her photography passion before learning to be more empathetic against the battle for good and evil, to the point of sacrificing herself in episode 10. It's a pretty rough transition due to production issues, but it is helped that her replacement, Jun Yabuki, is a really likable hero. She's a headstrong archer who needs to catch up with the rest of the team in terms of skill and social circles through her introduction in episodes, eventually fitting in with the team like she's always been there. And as someone who's been in a similar position in my life, I found it kinda nice that Bioman told a story like this. The crew made tasty lemonade out of the sour lemons that were their production woes, shaking up yet reinforcing the team dynamics that got Sentai this far. In terms of antagonists, we have Dr. Man, a villain who's a classic example of the unhealthy obsession with science that leads so many down a dark and apathetic path. His backstory has him constantly double downing on his work even when it's good enough to be done, showing the dangers of an unhealthy obsession with perfectionism. However, when people talk about the foes Bioman goes up against, you always hear about Biohunter Silva. He's a wild-card rival who's not quite with the villains, but certainly doesn't work with the Bioman. Silva was built for the War of Bioparticles, specifically on the anti-bioparticle side, which led to him being a major factor of why Bioplanet's destroyed, which shows an opposite side of what Dr. Man represented, just in a different but equally devastating extreme. I believe Bioman's motifs and themes ultimately led themselves to being about the balance of societal and technological progress. While Dr. Man indulged too much into the unknown for his own sanity, Silva's creators rejected any kind of progress, leading to their society's destruction. Then there's the Bioman, who balance both of these extremes by using the powers of advanced science fiction tech beyond our comprehension, but still keep their grounded humanities through and through. Overall, I think Bioman was an amazing evolution of what Denjiman brought to the Sentai table, and then some, which was quite refreshing after a few shows that stuck too close to the status quo. As for Changeman, this is a series that I enjoy, but don't love as much as Denjiman or Bioman, but it's still better than Goggle 5 and Dynaman. The show's premise gives our heroes military backing, but the militarism actually ties into the war story Changeman presents, as the villains of the show are war prisoners who are forced to do the bidding of the Star King. This setup creates these little complexities within the recurring villain generals, seeing how some want to find a way to escape and overthrow the king, while some want to return home to their families. I am not kidding when I say the character of Navigator Gator has some of the most emotional Sentai episodes I've ever seen. Changeman is a solid show. Not the best, but far from the worst. Flashman's on par with Changeman in terms of enjoyment for me, though the major standout was the heroes rather than the villains. As a collective, the Flashman cast are really charming, but they also have one of the more tragic backstories of the Showa-era heroes. Being kidnapped from Earth when they were merely children, only to be trained for their Sentai endeavors on other planets. Seeing the team readjust to 80s Japan Earth life and reconnect with their humanity through various adventures gives the series an extra layer of pathos, making the twists and turns of the final few episodes much more exciting. It's a shame a show like Gokaiger never followed up on Flashman's ending. There's a lot of potential for a follow-up there, but either way, the show is good fun on its own, so it's not that big of a deal. Then there's Maskman, which tried a lot of new things for the time, such as giving each ranger a mecha piece that all combined into one giant robot. We've had combining robots before, but now each piece was more individualized for each member of the team, which adds a lot more to the visual variety and characterization of the mechs. This series also strayed away from science fiction concepts and leaned more into the mysticism of aura power in Chinese-style martial arts, which did pave the way for future shows to get a wider variety of themes and motifs to tackle. The cast is alright, lots of focus on the Red Ranger Takeru and his lost love, which does add some neat drama to the proceedings, though I think this concept would be done better in Jetman, but it's still cool to see the start of the many Sentai romantic plots over the years. My personal favorite was the Blue Ranger Akira, the youngest of the team, whose episodes often lead into the silly, dramatic, and kick-ass trappings of 80s Eastern martial arts films. Despite some great bits and influential moments like the one-episode showcase of X1 Mask as a prototype for the Six Ranger archetype Sentai would permanently adopt in the 90s, Maskman ultimately ends up being as just another standard 80s Sentai show for me. Far from bad, I enjoyed myself quite a bit, but by the end I thought I lost a lot of steam compared to the great exciting energy of the early episodes. And to end off the Showa era of Super Sentai, we have Live Man, a fan favorite for a good reason. The pitch of the show goes for a more dramatic approach, as the villains and hero factions used to know each other before the villains did the whole betrayal shtick. This leads to the overall tone of Live Man to take a more somber approach, even in the arguably sillier episodes. This has helped that the initial Ranger roster is smaller than normal with 3 Rangers to start, though unlike Sun Vulcan, the characters are more individualized and entertaining when it comes to their archetypes, and we actually have a woman on the team, thank God! Yusuke is a solid red. I love the reoccurring motif of Joe's episodes being the highs and lows of connections, even if he is a bit short-tempered, and Megumi helps keep the boys in check while growing from a dismissive lass to one of the more empathetic characters in the show. I love seeing the different dynamics our trio of heroes have with our initial trio of villains or monsters of the week. Sometimes they feel this lingering feeling of betrayal and hurt, sometimes they extend an open hand one last time, and sometimes the hero never had any positive feelings towards the villain, so they're going down. Now, Live Man does get 2 extra permanent party members by episode 30, the Green and Black Rangers, who aren't as well realized characters as the first 3 Rangers, sadly. Junichi, aka Green Sai, gets the better end of some of the more memorable second half episodes like the infamous Mpreg one, which I actually really liked, but Tetsuya, aka Black Bison, is just kind of an angry guy with not much else to him. I sadly do think the show loses a lot of the subtler, somber attributes as it goes on, which isn't inherently a bad thing as our heroes move on and cope with the beginning show tragedy, but it does feel noticeable, especially as the show ends on such a wet fart of that's all. If you're gonna watch at least a couple Sentai from this era, Live Man ain't a bad one to pick, as the aesthetics are some of the best of the era, the episodes are great at balancing Sentai hijinks with a more somber undertone early on, and even if the show ended up losing a lot of steam by the end, Live Man still serves as a great culmination of what Showa Sentai has accomplished while planting the seeds for modern innovations for the 90s and 2000s series. It's a solid send-off to the Showa era of Super Sentai shows, which means I can finally end this segment. Is what I would say if Soda didn't write the next 2 shows to start off the Heisei era. Here's the thing about Turbo Ranger and 5-Man, they are technically Heisei shows, but they share a lot of the same trappings as the previous Showa entries, which makes them this odd duo before Sentai got its big 90s shakeup with Jetman, but I'll still talk about him here. Turbo Ranger is the first Super Sentai series where the main aesthetic of the heroes is themed around cars and vehicles, though you couldn't guess that based on the core narrative elements of high school students, fairies, and pollution. This show is a big hodgepodge of all these separate ideas that don't take the time to gel together like future Toei Toku would do competently with separate ideas. I like the irony of the Turbo Rangers being warriors of a decaying Earth, but for better or worse, the show never really elaborates on why that is, other than the guy who helped the fairies really liked cars. Another average show, though one of the recurring villains, Yamimaru, is really great. He antagonizes the heroes both in costume battles and in daily high school shenanigans, and I love how his human disguise is straight up a Japanese youth delinquent outfit to contrast our heroes' more normal school attire. Turbo Ranger's fine, but I've watched so much Super Sentai at this point that my brain is starting to feel like mush. And to be clear, it's not the show's fault. If you just watch a Sentai every few months, it's fine. But if you binge them back to back to back like I've been doing over the last few months, burnout comes a knockin' real bad. Which probably happened to Soda, given how we're approaching his final show as head writer, 5-Man. In some areas, you could tell that he and the crew were burnt out with how nothing the villains were, but on the other hand, they're delivering some of the best versions of Sentai episodic plots with fun family bonds being put first and foremost. Now, I don't normally talk about aesthetics since I'm generally very easy to please when it comes to toku suits, but I think 5-Man might have some of my favorite suits for how personable they are to the character. Each of the helmets represent a core idea that's important to each of the 5-Man as an educator to the youth of the Earth, which is such a simple yet brilliant touch to emphasize the themes and characters of the show. There's a lot to like in 5-Man. I might honestly revisit it one day, since I feel like I gave it a bad shake binging it back to back with all these other shows, but I think I want to rest a bit before I revisit it. It's very enjoyable overall, and I love the stretch of episodes where there's these recurring 5-Man dolls cheering on the cast for no reason, but it's whimsical and funny and I like it. And that is every Super Sentai series written by Hiroyushi Soda. God, I'm so tired. Note to self, never talk about over 500 episodes of episodic television in a 12-minute video. While I've made it no secret I'm not the biggest fan of this era of Super Sentai, I still appreciate it for getting us to the shows I do genuinely love, and there's still a lot here to appreciate that goes under-discussed. If any of these shows sound interesting to you, even if I didn't like them, check them out! Though don't binge them back to back to back, just space it out, for your own sake.